All right, thank you so much for joining us today on how to foster and maintain your emotional health. And one of the things we like so much about this workshop is that it is not only helpful for the participants in the room to use in their own lives, but this is great information, and there are some great tools in here that you can use for those that you live with, those that you work with, and those that you serve. So take this out into those places to help everyone be able to foster and maintain their emotional health better. So before we get into the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about some group norms and Zoom etiquette. We've all been doing Zoom for a while, but it's always good to do a quick check-in on those things. We always ask our participants to be open to new ideas, to listen without judgment, to take up space if you aren't someone who typically takes up space in a presentation like this. And if you're someone who sometimes does feel comfortable sharing, maybe take a step back and let other people take some space for their thoughts and ideas. And we always ask that we take the message but leave the story. And really what that means is if somebody talks about something personal and what they experienced resonates with you, take the part that you can learn from, but leave their personal story in the room. If everyone could display their name and pronouns, that makes it really easy for us to be able to interact with everyone. As mentioned, turn your video on as able. Obviously, if you're not in a space where the video is accessible for you, that's totally fine. And stay muted unless you're sharing, just to cut down on any background noise that could be happening. All right. So the first thing we want to do is ask you what you think of what you think emotional health means. When you think of the term emotional health, and if you want to raise your hand or put it in the chat, we can brainstorm that. What do you think when you hear emotional health? Anybody have any thoughts? Mental well-being, yep. Thank you, Jacob. Feeling comfortable in your body and environment, or at least having the tools to get yourself there. Yeah. Having the tools to know where to go when you need access to them. Great. Finding balance. Feeling safe. Managing stress. Being able to process your emotions. Emotional health is being aware of your feelings and giving yourself time to process them. It's our resilience. Needing to take care of yourself and knowing the resources to support you. Acknowledging what you feel in the moment. Being able to identify emotions and regulate emotions. Yeah, these are great. Having the ability and tools to be vulnerable surrounding emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and then using those tools to cope. Feeling able to do the activities you need and want to do, that's important. Reacting to others appropriately. Finding calm. Awareness and processing of emotions. An idea by Martin Seligman is to create an understanding to what makes life truly worth living. Those are awesome. Yeah, and a lot of these things we're going to talk about today, which is a really great start to the conversation, is getting the ideas from all of you on what you already think emotional health means, but also to kind of preview what we're going to talk about. Okay, so emotional health is all about how we think about things, how we feel about things, and how we behave when things happen. So it's also the ability to monitor and adjust those thoughts and feelings of behavior as they're happening. It's about knowing the signs that you need to be aware of to adjust things as they're happening, and being aware enough of yourself to manage those changes before they're happening. So that's really where understanding and being able to foster your emotional health is so important, is that we are able to get to know what those signs are, what those experiences are around emotional health, so that we can act as things are happening to us and not just be reactive to things that are happening.
All right. So as I said earlier, my name is Marissa. I apologize that I'm talking to you through a veil of seasonal allergies, that my allergy medicine is not quite cutting through, but I'm very excited to be here. Ready to talk about, if we know what emotional health is, why might it be important? Whoops. So when we're thinking about why does our own emotional health matter, and why does it matter to both ourselves and the people around us? So in that similar way, feel free to pop things in the chat, or if you want to unmute, you are welcome to do that as well, about why is having good emotional health important for us and those around us. Yeah, I mean, you'll continue your work, right? And that's something that certainly comes up, especially when we're thinking about either our jobs or, the volunteer work that we do, because avoiding burnout. Yeah, just everyday functioning, right? Absolutely, Rosa. Like, just that is key to the way we move through the world every day. Helping us form and maintain healthy relationships. Yes, absolutely. And it's important because it also impacts our physical health, right? It doesn't just kind of stay in our heads. So we know that there's a lot of ties between that emotional health and that physical health. Be able to kind of work and support our family members, right? Some of those logistics in life. When we are feeling emotionally well and emotionally healthy, those go a lot more smoothly typically. Building positive emotion, engagement and meeting will alleviate depression. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of thinking about the ways that we incorporate wellness into our lives, and kind of build up those stores of positive feelings and positive relationships. We have enough energy. Yeah, absolutely. So emotional wellness really can add to that energy that we have when we are trying to work and live our lives. And I love that. Have joy. It helps us have joy. That's wonderful. Yeah, and Abby, like, modeling how to process emotion. So when we are in a good place emotional health wise, then we're able to model how processing emotions work, and that modeling those ideas of emotional wellness for others, especially whether we're working with kids or the kids that might be part of our families. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's a great. So emotional health is a deciding factor whether we're living or just surviving, right? So we kind of got that like surviving versus thriving metric that sometimes we look at, and absolutely, like, we can be going through like the routines of the day and getting by, but are we truly in the moment? Are we truly experiencing life in the way that we can? That's awesome. Feeling grounded. Yeah, kind of feeling. I think that goes back really well to what someone had said in the last brainstorm, kind of like emotional health can be the tools to feel comfortable in your environment and within yourself, right? And that, I think, feeling grounded is a big part of that. Kind of feeling like you are here in your space in the world. Absolutely. These are great ideas. All right. Thank you for sharing those. I think, there's a lot about this workshop, especially within the context of a conference, where we really ask you to kind of dive into some of these very big picture human existence questions right away. And so thank you so much. This is great sharing for both this one and our last list that we generated. I'm going to switch back to our slideshow here. Awesome. And I'm going to turn it back over to Maura to talk about kind of our first group activity.
All right. So I think I'm muted. Am I muted? No.
No, you're good.
Okay. Sorry. I'm using the phone for the first time presenting, and I cannot tell when I am muted from the phone. Anyway, so we had created this emotional health grid at the start of the pandemic when we created this workshop, because we realized that not only ourselves, but the people we care about were, finding it more difficult to recognize what they were feeling in the moment and managing things in the moment. So what this is we have our physical signs, our emotional signs, and then what others would notice about us when our emotional health is good, which is in this green area here, when our emotional health might be like coming up with a little stress. So this is when you're starting to kind of feel the stress. And then in the red, when you have just gone into the danger zone of emotional health, where you are not functioning well, where you are not feeling well, where you are not reacting well. So these are examples. These are my examples for ways that I know if where my emotional health is. So physical sign for me, so it's one of the first ones to go, and it is a clear indication for me, is that I tend to fall asleep easily. So when I am in a good space emotionally, I fall asleep very quickly. When I start to feel overwhelmed or stressed, I notice that it takes a little longer for me to fall asleep. When I am in a danger zone in my emotional health, I can't sleep. So either I can't fall asleep or I wake up and can't fall back to sleep. So I know when that's happening for me that I'm feeling some stress and some anxiety, and that is taking a lot away from my emotional health. My emotional sign is that typically I can handle a frustrating situation in a really positive way. I don't react in the moment, I think it through, I come up with a plan to talk about something. When I'm starting to get some stress, I might move right into blaming of others. Someone else's fault, someone forgot to do something, someone left something out, it's somebody else. And then when I'm in a danger zone, when I'm not doing well emotionally, I will react by yelling. It's not my proudest moment of life, but it is how I know my emotional health is not in the best place if my reaction to anything, unless it's like danger, is yelling. And then last is what others would notice, because this can be one of those areas where sometimes we're not able to, even if we know that, I'm not sleeping well and I'm blaming other people for things, I still might not be in a great place to be able to manage what's going on right now. But if someone in my family or a friend notices this, they might be able to reach out and give me some additional support that I might not be able to give myself at the moment. So the what others would notice is really good for those who care about you and who are there for you to know about you. So when I'm in a good space, I answer phone calls when they come in, unless I'm busy. But if the phone rings, I answer it if I can. When I'm getting a little stressed or overwhelmed or feeling any of those more challenging emotions, I'll send it to voicemail, check the voicemail first before calling back. And then when I'm in that danger zone, when I'm really not functioning at my best, I ignore calls completely. I won't make calls back. So these are my personal ones. Where you land with any of these could be very different. Some people don't sleep well, and that would not be your starting point. Falling asleep easily, if you never sleep easily, is not your starting point. These are my starting points, just to outline how that could look. Some people never answer the phone and always send it to voicemail, and that's totally valid. So that is your starting point. But these were mine, and it always helps to kind of outline how those look. So if my friends call and I never call them back, I don't make any calls back, they know that something's not right and they will find other ways to check in with me. Or my husband will say, you haven't made any, you haven't called anybody back, and what's going on? So there's lots of other supports that you could have that could be looking at these things with you and for you. So in our first breakout, I'm going to bring up the tools that we're going to use for this and put it in the chat so that you have them available. There is both the breakout slide to explain what to do in the breakout, which we are going to go over, and there is the grid for you to have to work through. So in your breakout room, you're going to have about 20 minutes. So you're going to do some quick introductions, name, pronouns if you're comfortable, role at your agency, and how do you see yourself using this grid in real life? What could you do with this grid in your work, in your home, in any of your relationships? Then take about 10 minutes to fill out your grids individually, if someone could keep some time. And then the remaining time, share with one another, note any themes, give some feedback. So somebody might be able to help you through some of those other areas if you're a little stumped. And then we're going to ask a few of the groups to maybe share some ideas or thoughts or what comes up while you do this activity. All right, so in a thought around our time, because we do still have some more aspects of this that we want to cover. I just figure a few shares from anyone interested in either sharing their red to yellow or green to yellow to red, or just thoughts around the grid in general. You can raise your hand and unmute or pop something in the chat. Yeah, so AmeriCorps people who are dealing with emotional health without their family nearby sometimes. Yeah, that's really tough. And we have a lot of great ways to keep connected, but that's not always the same as being physically near the people that we care about. So Jacob felt that his green was more about being open and more emotionally available to those around him and more closed off when you were entering the red. That's a really, really great observation around that, how that changes as well, right? How open we are to one another when we're in a green space versus a red space. Another group shared that when they're in their reds and yellows, they isolate more. Yeah, so thinking about the importance of emotional health and why emotional health is important in those brainstorm ideas we came up with, those interpersonal relationships are so important. And when we're in those yellow and red spaces, we're more isolating. And I think that is something that could be felt fairly commonly throughout. Loss of overall energy and decrease in the want for more social interaction. Yeah, another reason why it's really important to recognize this and to pull in others is because sometimes when we're moving into those yellow and red spaces, we have less energy and less capacity to really figure out how to get ourselves back to the green. And those people in our lives who care about us and who are there for us can help us kind of implement some of those things we know works for us. These are great shares. Thank you so much. And just one last thought on the grid is that we can do a lot in those spaces from moving from green to yellow before we get to the red, and we can still do things even when we're in the red. And that is what Marissa is going to talk about next, is what are those things that we can do when we're moving from green to yellow and yellow to red to get us back up to green again. So thank you everyone for sharing. That was awesome.
Along the lines that Maura is saying, also for finding, as Abby said in there, living, existing a lot of our time within that yellow zone. Like that's an interesting, it's an interesting place to be, and hopefully there is that feeling of the yellow being like part of the progress to the green, and not just sort of like I'm clinging onto the edge hoping not to fall into the red, right? Like hopefully with some of the things that we do and the ways we think about it, you kind of see like what are those things that can help like boost me up a little bit into that green zone. All right. So we are going to transition into an activity that will involve making kind of like some reminders for ourselves, like an emotional health board with reminders to ourselves of who are those supports, what are those supports that we have. So in this next section, we're gonna do a couple activities as a large group, talk about these 6 ways to support emotional health. So if you're near, like, you're probably near a computer. If you want to take some notes, either on paper or typing something into your phone, because we will kind of like take these categories and what you think of as we go through them. We'll kind of take those into another activity before the end of our time together. So obviously there are more than 6 ways to support emotional health. And even within these broader categories, you're going to see some big differences between what you might put versus what someone near us might put. So hopefully there's ways to kind of personalize within these kind of larger buckets. But number one is identify your supports. So who are those individuals and organizations that are the folks who support you? Oftentimes, hopefully a lot of us are finding ourselves either in the green or the yellow. We know that some folks in here are also living in the red, and that is a tough place to be. But one of the things that we can think of, hopefully, is that when we're in that green or yellow zone, if we think of those supports at that time, when we get into that red zone, or we're trying to like claw our way out of that yellow zone, it's easier to, like, when the list is already generated. So we already know who those supports are. So Maura just popped in the chat. We have our handful of help, because we're going to talk about 5 different categories, and so many of us have 5 fingers, and so that is why we use a hand illustration. So if you want to do this like in kind of that hand file, you absolutely can. You can also just make a list, whatever feels a little bit easiest for you and wherever you're at tech wise. All right, so you can also like kindergarten class style, right? You can like draw your hand if you want it to be your hand specifically. Don't make a turkey out of it, but like instead label some parts of it. All right, so we're gonna start with the thumb. So think about and make a note for yourself, who is someone in your family or in your home that is a support to you. So it could be someone, ideally it's someone that like you live with or live real close to. So maybe that's someone in your biological family, or a chosen family, or a roommate situation, maybe living with friends, no matter what your kind of living situation is, write down for yourself, who's that person that you find supportive at home. Obviously, if you live by yourself, maybe thinking about someone that, even if they're not right in your home, is someone that you can reach out to pretty easily to see or talk to, or a little bit of both. All right. You certainly might have more than one person, but just for this, we're going to kind of think about those top 5 in these categories you might think of. All right. Then for another figure, you are going to put a friend or coworker. So not someone who lives quite as intimately with you, maybe not someone who's part of your family or part of your home situation, but a friend or coworker who is someone that you can turn to, when you're feeling stressed, is going to be one of those people that helps you identify when those times are and helps you kind of move a little bit forward. Is that good listening ear? So friend or coworker. And as we go through these, if there are any categories where like an answer doesn't jump right out to you, that's okay. That's not like a deficit that you're feeling. One of the reasons we do 5 different categories is that kind of depending on what the issues are, what kind of things you're going through, one of these people or categories might not be the best fit for dealing with that particular thing, which is why we can try to look at that diversity of supports. So if there's a figure that's hard to fill out, that's just something to kind of think about for the future. All right. So then the third one would be a family member or a friend who lives at least 1 hour away. So something's happening in your home situation, something's happening in your town, your community, and you want to talk to someone that just like absolutely has your back and is absolutely not part of the drama, right? Like someone who is not part of that like local stress you're experiencing, and who just is 100% going in there on your side, because they certainly aren't part of it. So someone who lives at least an hour away. All right. And now thinking about your community, right? So this could be an individual or a community group. So something fairly local to where you are, like some kind of community support that you could probably like go and see or visit with or get to. So this could be like a professional relationship. This could be if you're part of a religious community, maybe someone from there or the community itself. If you're part of any support groups, any kind of 12-step groups, anything like that, that might be a support for you. It could also be, maybe you like coach softball and it's one of the other coaches that's part of your group of coaches for your softball league or something like that. So you can kind of think about who's around that you can put down that is someone you can reach out to that's going to be that supportive person or supportive organization. And then finally, what's a national resource that could be supportive? So this could be something you already know. And if you don't, this is a great one to maybe do a little bit of outside research about. If you know that in your line of work, maybe you're often when you're often working with individuals who have been experiencing domestic violence, and so it'd be helpful for you to kind of have one of those national hotlines or like a national support group around that. That's a group of educated folks that that you could reach out to if something is stressful within your local work. So something's gonna be a national hotline or support group. All right. So that's your handful of help. That is something that we found handy. Again, it's great to kind of think about it when you're not in an acute crisis, so that hopefully when something comes up, you can look right back at that. So we have folks who like to keep that, nearby, keep it like put it on a little post-it note at your mirror in the morning. Like here's 5 people that like, or 5 organizations that have my back when something stressful happens. All right, so that is one of those. Kind of thinking about who are your supports, identifying those supports. So then one of the second ways is managing stress, right? How do you manage your stress? So kind of, think to yourself, make some notes. What are those things? We talked about it at the very beginning. If you were on at the very start of the workshop, we had the opening question, right? Of what kinds of like no cost or low cost things can you do and that you enjoy when you are de-stressing. It's time to manage some of that stress. This could be, some of those ideas that you put in to the chat. This could be some other things you've thought of since then. But how do you manage that? What are some of the things you like to do? Maybe it's maybe it's something that involves other people. Maybe it's something that is something you do by yourself. Maybe it's a mix of things, right? That's going to make that list, especially since a lot of people kind of shared that theme of, when I'm in that red or yellow zone, I tend to isolate a little bit more, kind of, don't have the energy for social things. So sometimes kind of thinking about, what I do, like, I can remember that it is like really stress relieving to go on a walk with a friend. And I've kind of lost sight of that and kind of bring that back up for yourself. All right, the third one is that mind-body connection. So what do you do for that? What are some of those things, for a lot of folks, I know we had a lot of folks mention meditation as one of those stress relieving things. There might be some crossover here too, right? So folks, also mention that connection between emotional health and physical health. So that's really important. We want to make sure that we are recognizing that those things are connected. So it could be things around like any kind of mindfulness practice. It could be things around meditation, yoga, exercise in general, maybe doing some of those things in nature, right? So like going for a hike, taking a walk, those things that really allow you to be in the moment, both with your focus and kind of sitting with yourself. Again, those tools to get comfortable within your own body and your space. All right. And how do you spend quality time with you? So not just when you're kind of isolating because things are really stressful, right? Like, what are those things you do that are just with yourself? Like, what are those things you like to do where you really check in with yourself? Again, this is something that kind of goes back a little bit into that mind body connection, because it might be some of the crossovers, some of those same activities. I am someone who loves a road trip. I love a road trip with other people, but I love a solo road trip too. So it's definitely something, that thinking about those things that are things you love doing with yourself. Again, if there's something in this list where there isn't an answer that's jumping to mind, that's okay. But it might be something when you go back, you're like, oh, here's maybe a way that I can expand the ways that I support my own emotional health. Let's see. And where do you get help, right? This is where we get into maybe some of those more organizational things. Where do you get help when you need to? Yeah. And yes, we can definitely make slides available as well. So who are those people you get help from? And where do you access that? So maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a support group, maybe it's like a Facebook group, or like a weekly Zoom game night, right? A lot of people had a few of those a little bit earlier in pandemic times. Where are those places that you get that support, whether it's really formal support or if it's just kind of bouncing some ideas off of each other. And then, what does a work-life balance look like? What does your school life balance look like? What does your work, school, and life balance look like, depending on the situation that you're in? So kind of thinking about what do you do to help create that balance, and where are things a little bit out of balance, right? And we know that there's going to be times, if you are, that there's going to be acute things that come up throughout any of these different environments. But in general, how do you balance that, and where could you, what could you change or adjust a little bit to get things a little bit more in balance? All right. So one of the ways that we put all this together is an emotional health board. So this is an example that one of our volunteers put together in order to kind of give folks a visual. So this is something that she had done. So again, you'll see the different categories that we talked about, and there are things that are very specific to her, right? So this isn't going to look like anyone else's emotional health board necessarily. This is going to be something that is going to be very personal, in this case to her, and in your case to you. So this was kind of the back and the front of a piece of cardstock. So something that you have up there, maybe some fun images, different things that help support you, that you can be like a great image reminder of some of your loved ones and some of those activities that you love, and then a list that you can put on there as well. So with that, we have a little bit more time, and I'd love to get a little bit of time for you to kind of put a start together on this. So maybe there's not obviously time to create a ton of art during this time together, which is also fun, but we will take a few minutes. We'll probably, just in the interest of time, we'll take a little bit less than this to kind of start the board, maybe 5 minutes or so to kind of start your board. Fill in that info, see what categories you're feeling really solid in, see what categories maybe you'd want to bump up a little bit. And then again, take a little time to share and note any themes. There's probably not much you would have gotten to start much to give feedback to, but kind of start to see the themes. And again, as Maura had said with the last activity, as you're doing this, kind of thinking about, yes, this is for you, and you can put this together for yourself, but then also thinking about who are the folks in your life that you might want to do this kind of activity with, right? Is this something you want to do with your family? Is this something you want to do with individuals you work with at organizations that you either work for or volunteer for? Who could also benefit from kind of thinking about things in this way? So with that in mind, so the second breakout, Maura has shared some directions in there, as well as a blank kind of setup for the emotional grid if you want to start filling it in digitally. And we will take about, well, maybe like 8 minutes, right? 8 minutes in the group so that we can do a quick wrap up all together. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time in that. We do hope that if you find this helpful, if it feels like this is something you'd like to spend a little more time on, we hope that you take these resources and continue on with this activity, you know, kind of dressing up your emotional health board as you go. Either unmuting or continuing on to the chat. Are there thoughts that people have? Any trends you saw? Any good places you could imagine using this kind of activity? Any ways you might see it being helpful? Yeah. Any ways you might see it being helpful with any groups that you work with? We've definitely, this is one of those things where we've done this, like, you know, kind of across the board age wise, like starting with high school and going through adults, and have definitely been, it's as a, you know, Lisa's saying with volunteer training, and especially if you have a wide age range within your volunteers, this is something that everyone can like get pretty quickly to these concepts and then benefit from, where kind of however much someone's really done some of these thoughts for themselves and done some of this, like, you know, introspection. That's true. Yeah, Maura, you're right. We touch upon it in middle school stuff too, because, you know, like, you can get to whatever depth, you know, you kind of really want to get to with understanding yourself and sort of some of your cues. But I think people can really, especially with the grid, that there's the physical, the emotional, and the kind of signs other people would see. Even if one of those isn't really something that you like connect with a lot, like probably one of those 3 categories you'll be able to get to for yourself, and kind of get to where to kind of make this useful for you. And then, you know, at the end of the day, like, even if, you know, you're still kind of making those connections between maybe, okay, how would stress management help me get out of the yellow zone and back into the green? It's still kind of nice to think about the people who support you, and like the ways that the tools that you have is, I see like a lot around toolbox coming up in the chat, right? Kind of the ways that, like, that something like this, and kind of making a collage of the things you find refreshing and supportive in your life is just kind of like a nice activity anyway, right? So kind of people can connect with the activity at a number of different levels, which really helps in terms of doing a shared group activity that everyone can really find something in that's going to be helpful for them. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, I love that this is something that is related to what you guys are doing. Awesome. So I know we are into our time. So hopefully, as you kind of look back on the time you spent this early afternoon, hopefully you're leaving with a couple different activities that you can take back to different groups you work with. And hopefully a little bit of, you know, you had this time. Like, I think there's a degree to which just, you know, focusing for, you know, an hour and 15 minutes on emotional health is a little bit refreshing and renewing, hopefully, for ourselves as well, right? Kind of thinking about these concepts for ourselves, taking ourselves and using ourselves as a perspective and a lens through which to view these activities can be a little piece of that self-care, hopefully, in itself, and a little bit of piece of that emotional wellness. So we are thrilled to have spent this time with you. These are ways that you can connect with us if you have any questions. Also, throw my email into the chat, and I imagine Maura will as well. If you have any questions, or if you're like, oh, I can't find the copy of that in all the handouts I've gotten all week, anything like that, we are happy to check in a little bit more. So we love doing these workshops. We're happy to spend time with you. Love the folks at Volunteer New Hampshire, and so it's been really such a pleasure to be with everyone today.